when we first started the conversation. He said, well, I'm not wealthy. And I said, okay, well, I'm managing most of his assets and we built and so I said to him, well, that's interesting. So what is wealth to you? And this gentleman had a wealth in excess of $10 million. So I'm sitting there going, if anybody has a wealth, he should have it. And his response was, anybody with $1 more than me. And I thought to myself, yeah, you know what? You're never going to find it. Welcome to the True Wealth Podcast, where happiness is more often found in the soul of someone's wealth rather than the size of it. Money, after all, is a tool. It's not the destination. Money is the fuel to advance your core values and your purpose. Join us as we share some inspiring stories, true wealth life lessons, and practical strategies to help you design a life of intention, generosity, and fulfillment. Today, I think it would be good just to give the listener a little bit more insight okay, so the name of the podcast is True Wealth. Mm-hmm. What is that? What does that mean? What does that mean to you?
I was going to turn it back to you because you literally wrote the book on this thing. Well, so I was going to say there's nobody better to answer that question in my estimation than you, because my definitions are rooted a lot, in all honesty, a lot of my definitions.
So we've always said that true wealth is everything you have that money can't buy and death is unable to take away. In its broadest sense, that's what it is. Now, what does that mean, right? Okay. So to me, I always tell people, if you closed your eyes and you said, if you were financially confident, you're spiritually nourished, you're emotionally engaged, you're physically fit, and you're surrounded by deep, loving relationships, really, life doesn't get much better than that. Right? The tricky part is most people think more money solves all that. And really, ironically, money is woven through it all, because money makes if you want to give philanthropically, or you have strong spiritual convictions and you want to support that entity, it takes money to do that. If you want to improve your health, it takes money to do that. So money is the tool or the engine or the fuel that makes it all work. But true wealth is much more than that. It's not a destination. So in a broad sense, that's what true wealth means to me.
I always think of City Slickers. You guys ever watch that movie? Yeah. They go on this cattle drive, and Curly, the grizzly cowboy, and him and Mitch are on their horses, and Mitch basically asks the question, like, to the secret of life, and Curly just lifts his one finger in the air and says, it's one thing. Yeah. And Mitch says, well, what is it? That's for you to figure out. You kind of right.
Well, that's true.
True wealth,
because true wealth is different for everybody.
Yeah,
really. I mean, there's basically a core that's similar for all of us, but there's extensions of that, which is different. And for some, it may be, they may think it's a house on a beach. Some, it may be, I want to put my kids through college. Some, maybe I want to retire early. But see, that again, now it's all focusing too much on money, and I think they're missing out on a much bigger piece of that. Ryan, how about you?
One of the things we discussed a few months ago was this idea that true wealth isn't a destination. It's more of a paradigm or a worldview. It's a way of looking at life,
a state of being
differently, a state of being, right? And so it's a hard one to decide, am I there or not? Because there isn't really a there. I think it's more of a lens through which we see life.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is to infuse that idea of true wealth, this idea that the true things, the really meaningful, purposeful, lasting things are the things that we want to focus on. How do we match, how do we connect the puzzle piece of your finances to that and make sure that they're communicating with each other and in line with each other?
Yeah. What I've found over the years is there's a certain point when you're working on it with somebody and you're laying out a good financial life game plan, and you're getting that all played out. You've identified their goals, what's important, all the things that every other podcast is each going to also talk about. But I've had it where there comes a moment when they say, you know what? I don't worry about money anymore.
Yep.
And it's just like, click, the light went on and says, well, when does that happen? Well, that's different for everybody. It may be that they're no longer worrying because the budget's figured out, or it could be that they're no longer worrying because they realize more isn't the solution. One of the things that I have found over the years, which we'll kind of use at the same time, is when I ask the question, why build wealth? What do you think some of the responses are? I know you guys asked the questions too, so share what some of the responses are.
The ones that truly mean something are the ones that, well, I don't want to be a burden to my family.
Yep.
And I found power in asking the question why, because I think you get to the real root of it. You get some that say, well, because more is better.
Right.
Because I want it.
Yeah.
And
I call those, they're more really personal prosperity.
Sure,
It's
yeah.
I don't have it, I want it, I need it, or
Yep.
what I have, I need more.
Yep.
And we can still work with those relationships, but those are exhausting.
Yep.
Because if you get $1 million, if you get 100,000, they need 200. If you get $1 million, they need 2 million. If you get 3, they need 5. It's the old adage, you've done a lot for me, but what have you done lately?
Right.
You can't, it's a target you can't hit.
Yeah.
They very, very rarely find true wealth.
Yeah.
One individual, he's come around, and he's, when I first asked him, that question, he basically said, well, I'm not wealthy. When we first started the conversation, he said, well, I'm not wealthy. And I said, okay, well, I'm managing most of his assets, and we built and so I said to him, well, that's interesting. So what is wealth to you? And this gentleman had a wealth in excess of $10 million. So I'm sitting there going, if anybody has a wealth, he should have it. And his response was, anybody with $1 more than me. And I thought to myself, yeah, you know what? You're never going to find it.
Yeah.
Because somebody's always going to have one more, and you're going to have one more than them. And the cycle continues.
Yeah.
So that true wealth person really falls more on when they start talking about personal responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like you said, I
Yeah.
don't want to be a burden to society.
Yeah.
What responses have you gotten, Ryan?
Well, and that comes back to our job as financial advisors. If we are just focused on the nuts and bolts, the Excel spreadsheet version of a financial plan, and the client has that worldview or that paradigm that just $1 more and then I'll be satisfied. It doesn't matter what we do. They're never going to reach that light bulb moment that you talked about, that they go, you know what? I don't worry about money anymore.
Right.
I feel like I'm okay.
It's not because they've reached that number.
It's not a
more
number. Yeah.
the soul of wealth, right? It's not the number that made that change. It's, I feel like my money is empowered.
Yeah.
It has a purpose because it's aligned with my goals. It's aligned with my objectives, or our objectives if you're doing this with a partner. And that's really what we want to get more people dialed into.
Well, at its core, isn't true wealth at its core a rerouting almost?
Sure.
That our culture has basically spent years, telling us that more is better, just $1 more, and it's going to be enough. We don't have this understanding and this grasp of what enough looks like in our lives. And so to me, true wealth is almost, churning up and tilling up the roots that have been placed in our life for a long time and replanting, seeds of truth. And I guess if I think about the concept as a whole, like if I just close my eyes and process true wealth, the first thing that pops through my head is some of your definitions. But what that leads to me is peace, is a huge one that always pops up in my head when I think about it. Confidence is another one. Joy is another one. And if you boil it down, like money cannot do that in our lives. We've talked about it a lot, that we've all seen people with plenty. They have more than they'll ever know what to do with, but there's no joy in their life. There's no peace in their life.
Right.
So that's got to come from somewhere else.
Sure.
And that somewhere else is different for everybody. But I do think that's part of our job, that if we're going to guide people towards a life confidently enjoyed, there's a confidence and a joy that are a piece of that. And if that can't come from money, then our conversations can't all revolve around money. There's got to be some sort of conversation point that leads them to processing things in a different way. Sure. And that's why I say, like, part of our job is that rerouting.
Well, for listeners and viewers out there, if you've gone through any college course or you've done an extension study, it kind of is based out of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure you both have studied that too. People can't start thinking about, why am I here? What's my purpose? What am I trying to accomplish? Until their basic necessities are met, food, shelter, clothing. Then once they get there, then they start saying, okay, now that is met, what's my next goal, or what's my next target in life, and then you do start thinking about accumulation. But still, it's when you get to this top level, which I don't, again, that's why we got to be careful. It's not a destination to reach that level, but it's when you start to get, okay, I need my money to align with what's my passions, what's my purpose, what are my core values. We've got some pretty interesting tools to take people through, which we'll make available in extended circumstances here, but that helps people drive through what are my values? What is my purpose?
Yeah. Why is it so hard in our society to do that though? I mean, it's not an easily grasped concept. And like, so what is it about our society that makes it so difficult?
Ryan, what are your thoughts? I always have a few. So Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think for us to redefine success as part of this idea of true wealth. One of a pastor that I've learned a lot from once said, success needs to be redefined as obedience to Christ. So whether you're a believer or not, I believe that to be true. But if we redefine success in our financial plans, I think that's a really important foundational piece to build the financial plan on. Because if success means you outperform the markets, well, the question you ask a lot of clients is, I think, extremely relevant. What happens if we outperform the markets by 10% every year and you run out of money? Have we succeeded? Right. Is that plan a success?
Right.
And so we need to redefine success. And success, I think, can be redefined with this idea of true wealth. Hey, let's get to the top of that hierarchy of the Maslow's hierarchy as quick as we can, so that we don't use all these pieces on the bottom that are our Roth IRAs and our tax planning and all that sort of thing. We don't use those as a means to an end, but we use those as tools to help us to accomplish.
Yeah, it's that self-actualization.
Right.
Why I'm here? What do I want to accomplish? What's my purpose?
Yep.
And part of the reason I think people have a tough time addressing that is because today's society, at least it feels different than when I grew up. You kind of have to morph to that, but seems to feel like a much more me society. I call it the 3x3.
Yeah.
If it doesn't fall inside of their 3x3 box,
yep.
They don't care.
Yep.
And I think to break through that, we have to get them to think beyond that 3x3 and say, or we got to get this in that 3x3 box that they can resonate with it, that just says, yeah, why am I here?
No.
Not about a goal that I want to accomplish, but what things are my passion?
Yeah.
And that's usually where you start to, you'll get a glimpse or start to uncover what true wealth means for them.
Well, and I think you look at society and the amount of time that we spend with technology and all those things, and all of the money and resources that goes into even how we interact with those things, right, and the experience that we have and the message that's trying to get delivered. Instant gratification. Yep. You need it and you need it now.
Yep.
And everybody else has it, and you better go get it too, or you're not. Those messages have been carefully curated and crafted for years.
Sure.
And all those roots have taken deep.
Well, Ryan, even the one you mentioned, if you beat the market by 10% every year, did you succeed? By a lot of podcast standards and by a lot of the information out there, the answer would be yes.
Yeah.
But it's that last piece.
Yeah.
Right. Does that really matter? The only index that people should be, in my mind, competing with is their own personal family index. What do I need to make based on how much I can save and my timeline to have enough assets to be able to do the things that are important to me?
Well, and I think too many people, we live in a scoreboard society too. We want to talk about issues with our society. And what does a scoreboard do? It shows you who's winning.
Right.
And so what do? When we don't have a basketball game to watch or a football game to watch, we go, okay, the scoreboard is my team versus the Joneses that live next to me.
Right.
And am I winning or am I losing?
Right.
And if I'm losing, then I need to do what I can to win, because winning is important in our culture. And in the end, he who dies with the most gold is still dead.
Right.
And so there's no U-Haul at the back of the hearse. I mean, none of this is going to go with us. And so we need to, again, back to this redefining success, getting away from the scoreboard that constantly causes us to compare ourselves to our neighbors and saying, let's look at our own selves instead of saying, okay, did we win this game today or not? You could win the game by 30 points in a basketball game, but you play terrible.
Right.
You make all kinds of mistakes. Did you really win that game? I mean, from a coaching standpoint, no. We have a lot more to work on than we did well, right? And so in getting away from the scoreboard mentality that compares ourselves to our neighbors and saying, what have we been put on this earth to do?
Right.
What are we supposed to do with what we have? And how do we do the best we can with the puzzle pieces we've been given? To me, that's a redefining of success that's more in line with true wealth.
Right. And it's not, basically me, the line is, am I better today than I was yesterday?
Yeah.
And how do I become better tomorrow? We'll unpack this in a lot more different ways, but again, we're trying to stay on our time level. Let me just share one thing, because for me, true wealth, I've always tried to teach it because it's been important to me, but for me, it stems out of my dad, who is my hero of life. He's been passed away since 2015. But everything I learned about true wealth, and I put that in my first book called Head North, but it's everything my mom and dad taught me about happiness at a little resort in northern Minnesota called Happiness. And, my mom worried about money enough for the both of them. My dad was a pastor, and to him, he had this true, the Lord will provide for me. And I thought, well, I believe that. But by the same token, it's like, Dad, you got to have a responsibility. And he said, I am. That's why I had you. You worry about it. But when I was growing up, he would say, yeah, your mom and I are wealthy. And I'd sit there and I'd think, yeah, no.
But why can't I have French fries?
Yeah.
Well, he asked me once, he said, is there ever anything in your life that you have really wanted that you don't have? And yeah, there was maybe a few things, but really I had to answer no. And he said, your mom and I have enough. To me, he was a pastor. So he had this unique balance between, he was a fisher of men and a fisherman. He loved to go up to northern Minnesota and fish. And for me, why that was important was because for 2 weeks out of every year when we would go find happiness, I'd climb in his little red Lund with him, and he was no longer a pastor. He was my dad. That was the one time I could see him, and the curtain came down and he would just talk. And he said to me, your mom and I are wealthy. And I'm going, no, not by the world standard. And he'd say, is there anything you've aspired for or that we have not provided for you? No. He said, I got enough money that I can buy the bait I want. I can support the things that are important to me. We can get away when we want to. I really don't have a lot of worries. We can support causes that are important to us. What more do I need? Yeah. And my light went on at that time and went, yeah, you know what? You're wealthy and I'm not. So I'm teaching it. He's living it.
Yeah.
So my goal, at least as an extension of this podcast, is to get more people living it out, aspiring to and trying to figure out through maybe some of our life lessons and teachings. I want that. How do I get that? So that's what I hope to uncover more. Any other insights before we close?
I mean, just listening to you tell the story about your dad, like that's the definition of stewardship though.
Yes.
Right. Like all of a sudden it changes the role that the money plays in your life. And it's instead of us owning it, and money controlling it, when you're able to truly just look at it and say, all right, if God truly owns it all, then my only job becomes to steward this well. And, I think, the question to ask a lot of times is, people come to us and they start to ask questions around those pieces.
Yeah.
And you go to the verse, I think it's out of Matthew 6, where they talk about seek first the kingdom.
Yep.
You're asking the wrong individual,
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, it's seeking how do I feel called to steward these dollars? If they're not mine, God has given me everything that I have, my time, my talent, my treasure, everything that I have. What is my role in stewarding that?
Right.
And I think when you can come to peace, which your dad obviously did, with what that looks like in your own personal life, that's where joy and comfort and peace and all those things come. So it's just that we had
the money aspect down, but I'll share more stories about him because he's one of my great resources. Him and I shared the same physical problems. We like to eat.
Yeah.
So yeah, as much as he had that figured out, there were other areas of life but even there, he kind of had them figured out. His doctor always told him, you need to eat less bacon. And he'd say, why? I like bacon.
Yeah.
And he'd say, well, because it'll add 5 years to your life. And he said, Doc, I'm a pastor. I've seen most people's last 5. It is not their best 5. So if I can avoid that. So he knew what he liked. Now he needed to be more responsible of that. And yeah, he said too, later in life, if I would have known I was going to live this long, I would have taken a little better care of myself. So that's important. We'll unpack some of those things.
Did your dad ever use the term true wealth?
No.
Or where did the terminology?
Well, I learned it as I was teaching concepts about there's more to life than money. And then through my affiliation with Carson Group, back at the time, Monty Carson had a teaching group that taught true wealth concepts, true wealth principles. Sure. So that's really where I learned them. And when I showed up, it was like, wow, yeah, there's a kind of a curriculum out there.
Yeah.
And I'll share some insights too of the person that was sitting next to me who had accumulated this more wealth than I will ever. And yet he was not happy. And it wasn't until he figured out what he really wanted to do with his money, which was unique. And it's a great story. I'll give you a little teaser for it. But he basically changed how he was using his money, and his wealth grew exponentially faster than it ever had because it was aligned. It was doing what was important to him. So that's where we want to get more people to.
And even then, what stands out to me about that story is we talk with a lot of clients about estate planning, right? I mean, that's one of the puzzle pieces of the financial plan. That's one of those black and white Excel spreadsheet kind of issues. But there's a difference between estate planning and legacy planning.
Right.
And I look at what your dad left behind to you probably was less financial.
Absolutely.
And yet you wrote a book on the 9 principles that your dad left you with. So when we talk with clients about things that are more aligned with true wealth, I think this idea that what you leave behind is not just dollars and cents. And it's important to focus on investing yourself in a way that doesn't just leave dollars and cents.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk more about that.
Well, you can see we're breaking our first rule of trying to keep this within a half-hour format. So we'll wrap it up and come back to, we have certainly more reasons for more episodes, right? We're not running out of things to say yet. So again, thanks for joining us on today's episode of the True Wealth Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, we'd love for you to subscribe, share it with your friends so that we can reach more people who want to experience a life of confidently enjoyed. Feel free to share your thoughts. And if you have any specific questions regarding future topics or specific things about True Wealth, send them to either Ryan, Nick, or myself. Just go to the info at pinnaclewealth.com. Send us your questions, and we'll love to we'll hash them out on the air as they speak. So thank you. Why Pinnacle Wealth? Because the pinnacle of wealth is true wealth. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon. The opinions voiced in today's True Wealth Podcast with Kevin Ingvers, Nick Omlet, and Ryan Ovenden are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendation by any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial, or tax advisor prior to investing.